How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Detroit Lions franchise here on Madden 22. My name is Football Fan Forever, and it's time to recap the Detroit Lions season, which we capped off with a victory over the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 57. We managed to completely flip the script, going worst to first over the course of just one offseason. We went 1-16 in our first season of this series and went 14-3 in year 2. We had some growing pains in the preseason, and I wasn't convinced that this team would be markedly better than the one we fielded last year, but then we rattled off 6 straight victories to open the season. We lost a shootout against the Cowboys, and then we went on another 6-game winning streak. We lost coming out of the bye week against the Washington football team before picking up 2 more victories against the Falcons and the Bills, giving us the luxury of resting our starters in the final game of the regular season. Having earned a first-round bye, we beat the Giants in the divisional round, survived a nail-biter against the Cardinals in the NFC Championship, and won our franchise's first ever Super Bowl appearance against the Chiefs. All in all, the success of our second season really took me by surprise. We made a couple of personnel changes at some critical positions, but we really only added 4 starters, and the majority of the team that went 1-16 last year still played this season. One change we did make was adding quarterback Bob Hairston, who replaced Jared Goff and did a really nice job of making plays when the team needed him to. He was aided by the number 1 rushing attack in the NFL, as our running backs averaged 5.5 yards per carry this season. I did feel like it was a little too easy to run the ball this year, so I'll be adjusting the sliders for Season 3. But when you're having success running the ball, that really opens up other areas for your offense and takes a lot of pressure off of your young quarterback, and that's something we were able to do very well this season. Jamal Williams led the team with 14 rushing touchdowns this season, as he was our go-to short yardage back, while DeAndre Swift, despite a reduced workload, still topped 1,100 yards and found the end zone 9 times. We also appear to have found a pair of very capable backups in Deshaun Stevenson and J.J. Dunlap, so our long-term outlook for the running back position is quite solid indeed. We'll have to re-sign J.J. Dunlap, as every other running back is under contract for next season, but Dunlap is one of those players who I'd like to bring back next season. Our passing attack, on the other hand, wasn't quite at the same level as our rushing game. We signed Christian Kirk over the offseason, and he ended up leading us in reception yards and touchdowns, but we had just one 300-yard passing game in the entire regular season. None of our pass catchers hit the 1,000-yard mark, although Hawkinson and Kirk likely would have reached that milestone if they played in the final regular season game. We got decent production from Quintez Cephas, but our challenge for most of the season was trying to figure out who our number 3 wide receiver was going to be. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nicholas Harper, Quan Sandridge, and finally Keegan Darby were all players that tried to fill that wide receiver 3 role, and it wasn't until Darby turned things on in the playoffs that I felt confident in our wide receiver core. Wide receiver is still an area I'd like to see be stronger going forward. We know what we have in Christian Kirk and Quintez Cephas, but Keegan Darby is still a bit of an unknown in terms of his body of work. We have a very small sample size to look at when judging what he can potentially do for this offense. And while he really jumped off the page in the Super Bowl, I want someone who is consistently going to make plays in this offense, and we just don't know if that is him. I also want to find ways to get Dexter Allen the ball a little bit more, as he's buried behind TJ Hawkinson on the depth chart, but his athleticism and potential are undeniable. As you can see from our longest reception numbers here, our offense was not built around big plays through the air, but even so, Dexter Allen managed to haul in the second longest pass from scrimmage this season. We do have a couple of contract decisions to make here, as Keegan Darby, Quan Sandridge, Nicholas Harper, and Hunter Bryant are all upcoming free agents. But Darby is really the only one I have strong interest in keeping, and we'll have to see what Harper and Sandridge want in terms of compensation. Our offensive line flew underneath the radar this year, but they were our biggest strength this season. They consistently opened up big holes for our running backs and only allowed 17 sacks during the regular season. We are likely to return a majority of our offensive line next season, with only right guard Halapulivati Vaitai as a potential cap casualty as he enters his age 30 season. I'm not opposed to bringing him back, but I would like to be aggressive in free agency as we gear up to defend our Super Bowl title. Our defense played better in Season 2 than in Season 1, most notably in terms of generating sacks and turnovers. But I think there's still a lot of potential for growth with this unit, and we still gave up a significant amount of yards. That being said, we were able to add some young players that we'll be able to build around, and we developed a few players that are currently on the roster that I think can be solid contributors for us going forward. D'Angelo Carmichael, who was selected number 3 overall in last year's NFL Draft, wins Defensive Rookie of the Year in the NFC this season. He led our team in both tackles and tackles for loss, and it wasn't even close. We also saw Devin Woodson dominate to the tune of 15 sacks in his rookie season, good for best on the team. The final rookie that got significant playing time this season was rookie cornerback Sean Francois. We took him in the 3rd round as an athletic prospect who needed developing, and while he still has a ways to grow as a cover corner, he showed flashes of potential and quickly ascended into our starting rotation as our slot cornerback. Other players who impressed me on the defensive side of the ball include Romeo Okwara, who had 12 sacks for us, Tracy Walker, who at age 28 probably had the best season of his career at strong safety, and Afatu Melifonwu, who tied with Walker for the most interceptions on the team this season with 4, despite not starting for the first several games. In fact, Melifonwu was statistically our best cornerback this season, and he went from normal development to superstar development over the course of the year. His ascent came at the expense of Amani Oruwariye, who really failed to impress me at all this season and is a candidate to be traded or cut. Will Harris is also a free agent, so we have a decision to make there if we want to bring him back like we did Tracy Walker, or look elsewhere for a new starting free safety. In terms of areas of growth for this defense, I want to prioritize a couple of things. One is to get some more pass rush, specifically off of the right side. We got plenty of pressure from Romeo Okwara and Devin Woodson off of the left side, but a platoon of Trey Flowers and Jabari Zuniga just didn't get the job done. Deshaun Hand, playing at right defensive end, did finish with 5 sacks on the year, but he's really more of a run stopper, and his low stamina prevents him from being a contributor on all 3 downs. I'd like to find one more proven pass rusher this offseason, either at right defensive end or at right outside linebacker. I would also like to look at an upgrade at our sub-linebacker position next to D'Angelo Carmichael, as Alex Anzalone did not play well in pass coverage this season, and Sean Dane Hamilton's lack of speed limits him on passing downs. Our special teams were incredible though. Austin Seibert was perfect on all of his kicks this season. 32 of 32 field goals and 38 of 38 extra points. More impressive is that he was 10 for 10 on field goals of 50 yards or more. We re-signed Jack Fox coming into this season, and while I'm not sure how much kicker attributes actually plays a role in this game, he did have an elite season, putting 19 punts inside the 20 as opposed to just 5 touchbacks. His long of 57 as well as his average and net average are a little bit low compared to the rest of the league, but there's no doubt that he helped us win the field position game this season. As for our return team, Keegan Darby had 77 kick returns this season, as that's not exactly realistic with teams booming the ball out of the back of the end zone more often nowadays. But he did have a kick return for a touchdown in Week 3 against the Jets. Although we're likely to be looking for a new kick returner this season with Keegan Darby in the running for wide receiver 3. It would be nice to have one dedicated kick returner on this team. So as we seek to address some of those needs I just listed, we do have some options for creating some more cap space heading into the offseason. One of those options is to release Trey Flowers. He's now 30 years old and saw his playing time decrease significantly from last season. He was one of our better run defenders this season and tallied 5 tackles for a loss and still managed 3 sacks, which is on pace with the numbers he had last year, but we can save $18 million if we cut him. Taylor Decker is another player that we could cut in order to get some more cap space, but starting left tackles are difficult to find, and he's been playing at a high level for us these past 2 seasons. One player that has seen his snaps decline a lot though has been right defensive end Michael Brockers, who's relegated to a reserve role this season. He only had 12 total tackles and 0 sacks and played just 174 downs in our base 3-4 set. So just to reiterate once again what I'm hoping to get out of this off season. Wide receiver is an area that I don't know if we have properly addressed due to the small sample size we've had with Keegan Darby in the starting lineup, but it's possible we have a decent first 3 wide receivers between Darby, Cephas, and Christian Kirk. Throw in TJ Hawkinson and Dexter Allen, and this could be a pretty dynamic passing offense in our 3rd season. Quintez Cephas is in a contract year this upcoming season, so we'll be keeping an eye on his contributions to the offense. He has really good hands and elite jumping ability, but his lack of top-end speed and his so-so route running ability are holding him back right now as a wide receiver. He did set a career best with 7 touchdowns this season, and he didn't have a bad year, so perhaps we just need to look his way a little bit more often. We will also need to find a new starting right guard, with Halapulivati Vaitai likely being shown his walking papers. He was a very consistent contributor for us this season, but he's 30 years old, and as I pointed out earlier, he's not cheap. So we can definitely look around for more inexpensive options at this point. The only other guard on the roster right now is former undrafted free agent LaRon Linton, and he has a long ways to go before he is a starter in my mind, so we'll likely be looking at free agency or the draft. As for the defense, if we move on from Trey Flowers as we're expected to, we'll need a new starting right outside linebacker, and our middle linebacker 2 position has been a question mark for most of the year. A combination of Sean Dean Hamilton and Alex Anzalone did not impress. And while Hamilton did okay in our base 3-4 set, we really need another pass coverage middle linebacker. Our secondary, I'm actually okay with at this point. We saw Ifatu Melifonwu earn 2 development upgrades this season, and I'm excited to continue developing him. He's just 24 years old. Sean Francois earned star development this year. He's only 22, and I'm excited to see how he continues to develop. While Jeff Okuda has superstar development as well and is now on the cusp of being one of the top 32 cornerbacks in the league. It's a young cornerback room, but there's a lot of potential here, so despite their struggles, I'm in no rush to break up this unit. I'm not sure I want to bring back Will Harris as our starting free safety though. He does have star development and he is a starting safety in the league, but I don't think his ceiling is very high as a player, and we could look to get a little bit younger at this position. The other free safety on the roster is 5th round selection James Winter. Winter didn't see the field much as a rookie, and he is, in my opinion, a fringe starter at this point in his career. So we'll see who's available on the open market at free safety. I'd also like to find another defensive end to pair with Devin Woodson on passing downs. Deshaun Hand is currently our best interior pass rusher not named Devin Woodson, but he's a better run stopper and doesn't have the stamina to play all 3 downs. Last offseason, we'd signed right end Jabari Zuniga in order to try and fill the role of rotational pass rusher, and my hope was that he could line up at a couple of different positions on passing downs. However, he wasn't exactly a great fit for our scheme, and the transition from a 4-3 defense to a 3-4 defense was a difficult one for him. Even when he lined up exclusively on the edge, he didn't make a lot of plays, and someone like Lucas Para is a lot more enticing for me to try and build around. I honestly couldn't tell you why Lucas Para is outperforming Jabari Zuniga in the same role, because Zuniga has better attributes in pretty much every single category. Regardless, I think that we can continue to evaluate pass rushing options both in free agency and through the draft. We will have the number 32 overall pick in the first round. I haven't advanced to the next week yet, so the game doesn't know that we've won the Super Bowl when it comes to determining the picks. But we'll have the number 11 overall pick in this year's draft, along with number 32, which gives us some flexibility. We can either stand pat and land 2 first-round players again after hitting on both Bob Harrison and D'Angelo Carmichael last season, or we can put together a trade package that is sure to vault us into the top 10 or maybe even the top 5. Someone like Dimitri Aldridge, who's one of my favorite players in this draft, is unlikely to be around when we pick at number 11, but could provide immediate impact on day 1 as our new starting right outside linebacker. Our need at right guard could be filled by Randall Barrow out of Auburn. He does have some injury concerns, however, and that's one of the things that's making this draft class really difficult to judge. A lot of players have a low injury rating or a low stamina rating, so perhaps you look to a player like Brett Fowler. He's not quite as good of an athlete as Randall Barrow, but he might be the best run blocker in this draft class, and he also has a good head on his shoulders as well. There's no shortage of wide receiver depth in this draft class. There's a lot of players projected to go in the first 2 rounds. My favorite is Bradley Arnaud. He's 6'5" and he's just 21 years old. The kicker with him is that he's an F in stamina. He wouldn't have to be on the field all the time with our top 3 wide receivers more or less set. But his low stamina score was one of the most disappointing things to come out of this scouting process, and you can see that I invested a lot of time into scouting him. If we look at the defensive side of the ball, there's a few players that have caught my eye as well. Someone like Georgetown reminds me a lot of D'Angelo Carmichael. He's likely more of a run stopper than a pass coverage linebacker, but he could step in alongside Carmichael for years to come. If Dimitri Aldridge doesn't fall to us at number 11, we could look to take Sammy Sears later on in the draft, because he's also demonstrated an ability to get to the quarterback. Most other years I would consider taking Kyrie Betts with our first round pick, but with our 3 cornerbacks all getting development upgrades and them being as young as they are, I didn't really see a need for us to go and take someone like Betts, who'd have to fight for snaps in our already loaded cornerback room. I could see us taking him if he's the best player available as a means of pushing our current cornerbacks and having an insurance plan in case we decide not to resign Jeff Okudah. But when you're in a championship window like this, you want to take players who will be starting on day 1. Beyond the first round, there is one player I've got my eye on for sure, and that's free safety Tyreek Buchanan. He's just 22 years old, and he's 6'4", which is pretty good for a safety. His athleticism is off the charts, and he is a turnover machine. He's already a solid run defender who takes good angles to the ball carrier and rarely misses a tackle. And his combination of size and skills would be a welcome addition to our defense. So there's a little preview of the upcoming draft. I could have spent a lot longer on this section if I'm being honest, because the draft is one of my favorite parts of the Madden off-season. Drafting is definitely a bit more difficult this year than in years past, and I'm excited to see how this year's draft ends up playing out. Speaking of the off-season, I have live streamed off-seasons in the past, and my current schedule doesn't really allow for that in the way that I would like it to. I've typically streamed on Saturday afternoons, and my weekends are just getting too busy for me to commit to a 3-hour live stream as much as I might like to. So what I think the plan is going to be is that I will go through the off season and I'll record the whole thing as if I was live streaming. I obviously wouldn't have the interaction with you all that I really enjoy, but I would upload that entire video so you could see all the steps and hear my thought process as I went along. That would then be followed by a condensed off-season just showing the highlights of the off-season as well as a preview for the team going into Season 3. I also mentioned this earlier, but there are a couple of slider adjustments I want to make. I felt it was too easy for us to run the ball last season, even with an above-average offensive line. And I also think that injuries should be a little bit more frequent, because that was something that we didn't have to deal with for most of the year. It seemed to me that injuries played a larger role in Season 1 than they did in Season 2. And I like the idea of us needing to rely on our depth in order to stay consistent throughout the season. And that will be the real test for this team. We have a Super Bowl championship to defend, and I'd like this upcoming season to be perhaps a little bit more difficult than Season 2 was. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you want to see us accomplish this off season, and like always, I will catch you next time. Have a good one, everybody.